Good evening, everyone. My name is Diana Wynand, and I'm the chair of the San Fernando Valley Climate Reality Chapter. We welcome you all. And once again, I'm going to ask you all to mute your microphones so that we can focus on our guests as they speak tonight. We're very excited to have a very special guest, and his special guest, Michael Zelniker, who many of you know, was co-chair of the Los Angeles chapter of Climate Reality for a couple of years, right around the time we started our chapter. And so Michael and I sort of worked together and dovetailed there. And we just couldn't be more excited about hosting him for this evening. Well, we always like to start our chapter meetings with a land acknowledgement. And I've asked our sustainability coordinator, Terry Saucier, to tell us why we do a land acknowledgement and then to actually read it. So would you go ahead, Terry, and take the lead on that? Meanwhile, I'm going to put it on the screen so that you can read along.
Of course. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. It acknowledges the history that has brought us to reside on this land, the colonialism that is present in our current systems, and calls on us to be mindful of our own present participation in it. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Tongva, Quiche, Tataviam, and Chumash tribes.
Thank you very much, Terry. Appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the program. And what I would like to do is kick off by sharing the 2-minute trailer. So just a second to share my screen. And then we're going to come back and meet Michael and the folks behind it. So here we go.
The toilet paper industry in the United States is an enormous purchaser of pulp from the boreal forest. We are literally flushing our forests down the toilet.
It's been described as the lungs of the planet.
It's the homeland of 600 indigenous communities.
You can't remove us from it. If you want to learn about life, let me take you to the land.
Countless lakes, countless rivers.
Not just our home, it's our mother.
A lot of the fiber is being used to wipe the ass of corporate America.
They don't see a tree with life. They see a tree that makes money.
We've had to endure the brutalness, of another people.
They killed your grandpa, the buffalo, so that you will starve.
We've got these concentration camps. We'll call them reserves.
And then, of course, I get shipped to the residential school. Change their religion, change their language.
Designed to strip the Indian from the child.
Break them right now, destroy them.
Our connection to our land has been robbed.
They lied to us that the animals were ours. They lied to us when they said the trees in the forests were ours. That tree is family.
If you take a part of my forest, it will no longer be a forest. And I don't know what that will become, but I know that I will not survive there.
So I would like to pitch it to Michelle Ringler, who is going to introduce the writer, director, producer, Michael Zelniker. So go ahead.
Thanks so much, Diana. So Michael Zelniker is a lifelong environmentalist with lengthy memberships in the NRDC, the Sierra Club, the Environmental Defense Fund, and Greenpeace. He's an award-winning actor and filmmaker who pivoted from entertainment to volunteering to help with the climate crisis. After being trained by former Vice President Al Gore, Michael joined the Climate Reality Project's leadership, serving for 2.5 years as the co-chair of the Los Angeles chapter. Here tonight to discuss this new documentary, The Issue with Tissue, which is now in its early stages of release, please welcome Michael Zelniker.
Hey. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Michael. And You know, to produce a film is not for the faint of heart. And you did it during COVID. And I wonder if you could just start by telling us a little bit about how you sort of got this idea and how you got started on it, and a little bit of how you journeyed through the time and the space and the distance to produce this amazing film.
Well, thank you, Diana.
And I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you for everyone. So there you go.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for organizing this beautiful evening. I want to thank my friends Nancy Turner and especially Amberly Quakegesic. It's late there now, so thank you, Amberly, for being here. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my journey and a little bit about the film. In April 2020, I received an email from NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, informing me that large, intact, old-growth forest landscape across the northern forests of Canada, what are called the boreal forest, that they're being clear-cut for the manufacture of toilet paper, of all things. Remember, in the early days of COVID, we were all hoarding toilet paper. So these existentially important forests that we literally depend on for our very survival are being mowed down so that we can wipe our bums with softer, more plush toilet paper, brands like Charmin and Kleenex, popular brands like Bounty. And I thought to myself, is there a more obscene illustration for what's gone wrong? I grew up in Montreal. I used to spend summers about 100 miles north of the city on what I now know is the southern edge of the boreal. And I feel deeply bonded to these forests and trees. I felt compelled to learn more. So countless hours of research. I'm a big believer in research. Dozens of hours on Zoom. I came to believe that the little known, largely untold story of the boreal must be told. Most people don't know about the boreal. You know, when we talk about forests, in most cases, we talk about tropical rainforests like the Amazon or even our temperate rainforest, but most people know nothing about the boreal forests, these northern forests that are a kind of green halo that circles the northern hemisphere across northern Canada into Alaska, around Russia and Scandinavia. Anyway, as I was researching, perhaps the most important insight I had was that any story about the boreal had to place the indigenous peoples of the boreal front and center. It is their home. It's home to more than 600 First Nations communities, lands and waters they've lived and thrived on for thousands of years. So after about 4 months of research, I flew from my home in Los Angeles to Vancouver during the early months of COVID, when we had to quarantine for 14 days, when we crossed borders. Before embarking on a 42-day, 12,000-mile journey from coast to coast, meeting with more than 50 First Nations elders and leaders, prominent scientists and conservationists, all who opened their hearts and shared their stories with me. I ended up in a remote part of northeastern Quebec at an Innu gathering that I had to travel by bush plane to get to, during which time the Innu honor their ages-old relationship to the caribou. Something I later learned is the caribou are the indicator species of the boreal and are endangered in almost every herd across the boreal. I then returned to Los Angeles with approximately 125 hours of interview, landscape, and wildlife footage. What began as a story about trees and toilet paper evolved and emerged into a much deeper narrative based on what was shared with me. The story now takes us from trees to toilet paper to treaties, from carbon to climate change, to caribou to colonization, from water to birds to indigenous knowledge and stewardship to the way forward. The boreal is an epic landscape that demands a very large canvas. In fact, aside from the feature film version that's playing in Los Angeles and has been playing around North America, I also have cut a 5-hour series that details the deeper, more comprehensive story that was shared with me. The issue at Tissue has transmuted from just another movie about eco-destruction into a critically relevant story about the horrifying impacts and legacies of colonization, the Indian Act, residential schools, and the other atrocities that the original peoples of Turtle Island have endured at the hands of settler governments. and how much of it was done in the service of unfettered extractive industrial exploitation. But the reason the movie is called The Issue with Tissue, well, obviously, because there is an issue that we should all have with the way our tissue products are being sourced. But it's also called A Boreal Love Story because our documentary is really a love letter to this magnificent landscape and to the indigenous peoples who call it home. I'm going to quote Elder Dave Corshane, what we do to the land, we do to ourselves. I've come to understand that the larger systemic issue we're going to have to confront and reconcile is what I call the disease of disconnection. Disconnection allows us to do things like colonization. Disconnection allows us to go into wild spaces, exploit the resources without any care or concern for how we're impacting the rest of creation. Disconnection allows us to throw away our children's future in service of satiating selfish, greedy, temporal needs. As Elder Dave Porter says, Casca First Nation, when we're in a forest among the trees, we're with our ancestors, our elder relatives. The trees are talking to us, telling us stories of life. The question is, are we listening? As we all know from our science classes, through the process of photosynthesis, trees breathe out oxygen. We breathe in that oxygen. We exhale carbon dioxide. Trees inhale that carbon dioxide. Can there be a more intimate, more mutually beneficial relationship? Were it not for forests and trees, we wouldn't be here. That's literally true. Our very survival depends on trees and plants. Dr. Suzanne Simard, many of you may know, Finding the Mother Tree, her brilliant book, speaks of her decades-long research into the subterranean mycorrhizal networks that exist in forests, that these collaborative, cooperative, mutually supportive relationships between the trees, the fungi, the mosses, and plants are what have allowed forests and trees to strive and thrive for millions of years. Trees have been on planet Earth for almost 400 million years, much longer than we humans. Surely they have something to teach us about longevity and sustainability. So perhaps the trees, our elder ancestors, are talking to us. Perhaps they are guiding us to understand that the way forward is not through that narrow interpretation of Darwinian theory, survival of the fittest and competition to the death, but through cooperative, symbiotic, mutually supportive relationship. As Elder A.J. Felix says towards the end of the movie in the section that I call The Way Forward, and probably what I quote most from the movie, he says, let's be family again. Let's be relations again. Let's love each other, because when we love, we respect and we look after each other. This theme of interconnectivity ties all the elements together, encouraging us to realize we are all connected. We are all family. As Joni Mitchell says in her iconic song Woodstock that we adapted for the closing of our documentary, we are star stuff, billion-year-old carbon. We are all made up of the same elemental DNA, the same primordial soup that those who call planet Earth home literally have emerged from. In fact, we are all related. We are all family. We do all come from the same stuff, the same Mother Earth. And the sooner we embrace and embody this ideal, the sooner we're going to find our way out of the existential crises that we have created that confront us today, threatening human survival and the survivability of the rest of creation that we share planet Earth with. So thank you all for listening. I hope you'll all come see the movie. The movie tells it much better than I just described it in a few minutes. And I do understand we'll have some time for some Q&A a little later on. I'm going to toss now to Dr. Nancy Turner. It's now my great pleasure to do so. If you read her bio, her brief bio, I'll just tell you quickly, Nancy is a world-famous ethnobotanist who has written countless books and research papers, graduated countless students during her tenure at the University of Victoria. Those of us who know Nancy, and even those who don't know Nancy, owe her a huge debt of gratitude for the brilliant work she's done during all these many years. What I also want to tell you about Nancy is that I've had the good fortune to meet Nancy, to get to know her well, and I can tell you that knowing her makes me want to be a better person. So here's my dear friend, Nancy Turner.
Oh, Thank you so much, Michael. That's such a kind introduction and a lovely background. I could just listen to you talk about the boreal forest and the people forever. You have such a wonderful way of portraying what you did and the importance of it in a very modest way. I want to start by also giving an acknowledgement to the peoples, the first peoples of this area where I'm living, on the west coast of British Columbia on Vancouver Island, right here off Nanaimo. The Nanaimo Coast Salish peoples have lived in this area for thousands of years. Other Salish and peoples all around us, the Quakegesic to the north and the Nuchanoth to the west. Altogether, here in British Columbia, 30 different language groups, 30 different languages are spoken. And I've had the privilege of learning from many knowledge keepers over the last 50 years or more. And it's such a pleasure to have had a small part to play in Michael's film, because living here, living in Canada, traveling around North America, and being a botanist, I certainly appreciate the value of forests. And the boreal forests are so special that it was such a pleasure to play a small part in this particular magnificent project that Michael has undertaken. I want to thank also Diana and Amberly. I'm looking forward to hearing from. I know a number of the people who featured in this film, AJ Felix. I'm so fond of him, and the late Dr. Dave Crushane. Also, I got to know quite well and appreciate his contributions. Just to quote Joni Mitchell again, we don't know what we've got till it's gone, paving paradise to put a parking lot. We could make similar words for what they've done to the boreal forest, and Joni Mitchell would understand. And as Michael says, forests are the lungs of the earth, and there are solar panels, they're living solar panels. And think about it. You can take a seed from a black spruce or a seed from a poplar. You can plant it and it can recreate itself. It's a miraculous microchip, you could say. What have we humans been able to do to actually perpetuate ourselves? We couldn't do it like that. And so the plants have a particular value to us because they can renew themselves, because they are the lungs of the earth, because they provide us with the oxygen that we need, and all of the materials, the foods, the medicines that all of us depend on. You might have heard about the knowledge keepers talk about how important the forests are for film and for food and for habitat. And this is such an important part of that film, to see the film that Michael has created, showing the caribou, showing the animals, showing the trees, and then especially hearing the voices of the people who are the knowledge keepers, who have lived in, and their ancestors have lived in these areas for so long. Now with the combined threat of looming climate change and the declines in biocultural diversity, forests are more important than ever to us. And it's hard for me to understand how the decision makers and the policy makers and the planners haven't done more, haven't recognized more the importance of this valuable resource for all of us, and haven't taken better steps to protect what we have to look after it, to care for it, because after all, it cares for us. As my friend Satlama Joan Morris would say, you have to sing to the trees. And I love the idea of the networks that our friend Suzanne Simard has so well portrayed, how the fungi, who are often ignored, actually connect everything together as well. Well, I could go on and on about the value of the plants. I brought a couple of things just to show, to illustrate the value for people in this area. This is a cedar bark basket and a very small one, but think about the importance of baskets as containers. We need them to hold the food that we gather. We need them to store the food that we gather for winter. And so just a small basket like this is symbolic of all of the different kinds of baskets that you can make from forest trees, from cedar root, from cedar bark, and even spruce bark and so forth. And we think about something like this, made from the wood of a yew tree, or sometimes from the knot of a hemlock tree, and how the forest links people to the ocean. There's no way that people could harvest the resources from the ocean without having the canoes, the wooden fishing spears, the nets, and the hooks, and all of that come from a forest environment. So everything is linked together, and we depend on every one of these different habitats in multitudes of ways. Most important of all, I think, they are the lungs of the earth, and they help us survive. We could not survive without them. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Dr. Turner, I'm not sure I'm going to let you leave it at that because you're so knowledgeable about this. And thank you for sharing that and to show us, bring us in on some of those items you just shared. From the science point of view, just wondering if you can maybe educate us, and probably we will get that when we watch the documentary, but and Michael mentioned it, but what's special about the boreal forest? If you can break that down for us on a scientific level of what are we losing, or what do we need to do to support it? I don't know if you can just respond to that, to add a little bit of your knowledge about the boreal forest. Is that a question?
Yeah, I think one thing that I really wanted to emphasize about forests are three-dimensional habitat. They're not just two-dimensional. They're not the way they're portrayed on maps, where you see a map showing the extent of the boreal forest from north to south and east to west, but the forest is three-dimensional. And when you clear cut the forest, you're clear cutting far more than just the two-dimensional space, but all of the volume of the forest and the species that rely on the canopy of the forest. All the birds, for example, all the songbirds who rely on that. And when you cut the forest, their habitat is totally gone. So that's one thing we have to keep remembering. Think about your redwoods in California and the volume of habitat that they provide, and then the volume of habitat that's lost when they're cut. And we have the same thing here in British Columbia with our old growth forests. We have hardly any left. And a second growth forest or a plantation forest is just not at all the same, and it won't be the same ever. But even if it were a naturally regenerated forest, it would take probably 1,000 years to redevelop the same degree of biodiversity and habitat that the boreal forest, the natural boreal forest, provides. And humans have had an important part to play in maintaining that forest as well. And I think that's one of the things the knowledge holders would all appreciate and have made the point in the film. people weren't just, people were active, had an active role to play in maintaining the forests, looking after the forest, tending the forests, we could say. You have a wonderful ethnobotanist there in California, Kat Anderson, who wrote a book, called Tending the Wild, about environmental management by Native Californians. But you could also write a book like that on environmental management of forest lands almost anywhere in the world by First Nations. In the boreal forest, people used fire in very special ways and controlled ways, and they practiced controlled burns in different areas to create a multitude of different successional stages, each one of which had its own complement of species that go with it. Like after a fire, we know that the berry bushes really thrive and they're very productive for quite a few years afterwards. And so they would have different places. The old growth would be in one place and where the lichens would grow for the caribou. But then there are other places that were cleared, and you'd have this mosaic across the entire forest area. And that's really an important concept as well, that Michael and the Indigenous knowledge holders that he taught to talk about that as well. There's a very well-known film from some years ago by Henry Lewis called The Fires of Spring that's exactly about that, how people used fire to help maintain the biodiversity of the boreal forest in northern Alberta. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there. I'm not sure if I
Thank you. No, thank you very much. I appreciate the extra detail. Michael, I'm going to pitch it back to you. Maybe you can introduce Amberly to us, and we would love to hear from her as well.
Right. I'm not a scientist, but I played one on TV before, so I'm just going to piggyback slightly on what Nancy was talking about. There are three really quick features that the boreal carry that make it uniquely special. Number one, it is the largest remaining intact forest landscape on the planet. So intact forest landscape have additional value, keeping them intact. And so the boreal remains largely intact. And so that makes it very valuable. Number two, it stores more carbon than any other terrestrial landscape on the planet. So in tropical rainforests, most of your carbon is stored in the wood, in the trunk, and the branches. In the boreal, most of it is stored in the soil. Because the boreal has a very slow growing season, when it decomposes during the fall and winter months, it ends up being stored in the soil. So the boreal has countless gigatons of carbon. And so as we see it degrading, that carbon is now being released into the atmosphere, exacerbating climate change and global warming. And thirdly, the boreal is the nesting ground for North America and for South America too. So approximately 2 billion birds nest in the boreal every year. As many as 5 billion then migrate south. So the birds that populate our parks and our backyards that we love, their song, they have nested in the boreal. They came from the boreal. So there are three really important reasons. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to Amberly. Amberly and I met as I traveled across the boreal in Northern Ontario. Amberly is a member of a community, Brunswick House First Nation, but she was also, worked with a community called Wakotoan Development. And I spent a few days with that group of amazing people. And Amberly and I met, we connected, and I said to Amberly as I left Northern Ontario, we're going to work together. And Amberly and I are now in the early stages of working on a documentary about water and women around the world who are fighting to protect it. So it's with gratitude and pride that I toss it over to Amberly, my colleague on this new documentary.
Annie, everyone. My name's Amberly Quakegesic. I'm a member of Brunswick House First Nation, and I live in Chapleau, Ontario. I'm currently taking this meeting in my van as I'm on a bit of a trip, and I'm actually in Wawa on Lake Superior attending a gathering at Michipicoten First Nation. So it's been a really lovely time so far. And yeah, so a little bit about me. I guess I can just share about the Guardian program a little bit. So my journey through working with Wokotowin has been incredible. Wokotowin is the Cree word for kinship. And, you know, like we were talking about, everything is connected. And so what I do, a big part, is managing the youth program, which is essentially about youth empowerment through land-based cultural revitalization, and just really connecting with land, community, really building out like the lands and resources departments, and you know, finding our voice as a community on how important it is to be a part of these conversations and stuff that are just going to happen whether we're there or not. So raising awareness with the youth. I really love working with youth. They're very powerful. They have a lot to say, and it keeps you hopeful being in those learning environments all the time. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of that. And I also get to participate as a storyteller. So the Guardian programs are actually all across Canada, if you haven't heard of them. And they have like a media campaign, the Land Needs Guardian campaign. So there's a group of us storytellers from all over Turtle Island, sharing stories and footage, and just, you know, talking about how our programs are doing and who's doing what. And everybody's program is so different and focuses on very different needs of based on the area that you exist in, I guess, and what your community focuses on. So Wokotowin was very much forestry related. And we did some work working with industry with herbicide reduction programs. The youth, a lot of it is very cultural. So like we just did a canoe build, the third build. We've been doing them one a year at this point, and the youth are a big part of the harvesting of everything, and just really getting to see this forest in a different way. Really trying to pull in food sovereignty initiatives, and getting really building that connection. Like we have this amazing 13 moons calendar, and then you get to see how our people lived, and the different types of medicines that they harvested, or animals, or activities that happened. So we run a birch tapping operation. We also do the canoe building. We were leading into ricing soon because there's a lot of rice out on our back river, working with trappers and medicine makers, and we have a drum group. And it's really special. It's really special to be part of all these connections, because I think it can be easy to be left out in this fast-paced world, but it's really important to go back and remember where we come from and what's important in life and what we really need to survive. And so I really am excited to be a part of this new project as well, and getting to hear these incredible stories from these really inspiring people, and hoping to be able to share that message with everyone.
Amberly, that's so interesting. And I saw in the chat that you attended a water ceremony with elders this morning, and we're very interested in water. It's a really sort of a tough situation here in California. Just curious, you know, I know it's not part of the documentary, but just curious what that was like to be part of that water ceremony.
Oh, it's incredible. To me, ceremony is a lot about giving thanks and making sure that you understand that we're all here to exist in reciprocity with Mother Nature, and that we're always sitting in a circle. There's no hierarchy. Yeah, it's about being grateful and remembering. Yeah, we just all sat on the beach right on Lake Superior. It was 6 a.m. We had an elder do a pipe ceremony, and we had drums and rattles, and we sang a couple songs.
Nice.
Feasted some berries, and it was a lovely way to start the day.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pitch it back to Michael, because I believe we have another special guest. Michael, let us know.
Yes, thank you so much, Amberly. That was beautiful. I can see it in your face. And I just scrolled through it to see that Chief Darrell Bob is on the call. He's in Germany. It's like 4:30 in the morning, or 10 to 5 in the morning. Chief Darrell, thank you so much for being here. Elder Chief Darrell, who talks all about gratitude when it comes to ceremony. So I gratefully toss to you. Thank you for joining us, Chief Darrell.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, hey, Mike. Good to see you again. You know, this guy, he rolled in during COVID, you know, all worried about getting people sick. And I just kind of chuckled about it because, you know, in natural law, it's part of things that in the prophecies, they talk about the waves that are coming that are going to impact Mother Earth. And, you know, COVID's a start. It's just a lot listening to the discussions and to what people are doing. It's good. It's good to hear that you know, a group here, you know, that educate people. It's something that our elders always talked about was, you know, I remember years ago back, actually probably about 1991, 92, they were talking about getting into treaty in our nation. And it really came down to our elders saying, you know, because it was a very, very big debate in our community, I remember. And they talked about it for quite a while. And at that time, it was two of my mentors leading the way. And it was Koopy Arthur Adolph and Koopy Roger Adolph, who's passed on now. And the elders always, you know, you as well, Nancy. It's always great to see you. You have, you know, Nancy comes to our community. It's amazing the work she does. You know, our elders always talked about the land. You know, for me, growing up with my grandparents, it wasn't so much talking about the land, but it was just working on the land. And that was such a big thing in my family. You know, how we worked on the land, how we would clean ditches and culverts for days. And but anyway, back to what I was saying. Our elders said, well, if we're going to work with them, we have to educate the government first about our land. And I never ever forgot that, because really that's what it comes down to, is educating people about our way of life and that natural law that we have. There's a structure within every nation in probably Turtle Island, but I'd say in what's called Canada, as you know, the tribes have natural laws, and those laws teach us how to look after the land through, like this young lady, storytelling. When it came right down to it, when we were talking about a possible treaty with the government, which we rejected after a while, because it wasn't really meeting what we were looking for. But it was more of what came out of it, most importantly, from the elders when they were asked, what is our number one goal? And the elders all said the same thing: to protect the water. The water is the most important. Like the boreal forest has to have water for those trees to grow. There's an ecosystem management plan that we've developed within our community, our little territory here up in British Columbia, Canada. Well, I'm not there now, but where I live, you know, and it's designed to sustain water. And right now, you know, the big threat is, and it's happening everywhere, and it's been prophesized that, I don't know how many of you follow the Indigenous prophecies, but there's some prophecies that are just kicking into high gear right now. They're just starting to warm up, you know, and I really think that people need to understand natural law, that law of how we should be looking after our Mother Earth, you know, because we all share that same land, but we also have to carry that responsibility to look after the one that looks after us. If we don't care for the ones that care for us, we lose everything. And right now, that's what's happening, you know, in British Columbia right now. And Nancy can probably attest to, or if anybody else is from BC, it's burning everywhere. And it's like that everywhere now. So we are going through what I call Mother Earth's purification ceremony. She's purifying herself, and she's doing it because we couldn't. We couldn't. You know, people talk about burns, the natural, the man-made burns that our people used to do to sustain the lands. Corporate corruption took that away from us and said, no, it's not your land anymore. So you can't do that. It's not legal. It was designed to take those trees to profit somebody else's pocket. So now we're paying that price. And unfortunately, it's going to be a bit of a tough ride here for a while. But and I just want to compliment the group here listening for the work you're doing. Because right now, we're on a crossroads where we have to make some pretty tough choices. And that government's going to have to learn to listen. Because it's starting to really, really hurt many, many, many people. So I'll leave it at that for now. I like Michael, I can talk forever, but I'm going to keep quiet there and listen to the amazing things that are talked about here too. So thank you for your time.
Chief Darrell Bob, I just thank you so much for being on this call, and especially at this time for you, early morning. So thank you so much. And I know one of the things that I've read that you've said is to look at the whole territory when you're making a decision, and to think about what we do to one, we do to all. And I think you've shared that really beautifully about how the choices that others have made are impacting you and the people in BC. I mean, everybody in that area, and it's impacting the United States as well. So we're experiencing that right now as well. So thank you for joining. I would like to invite everyone on the call to enter a question in the chat. If you have a question for one of our speakers, please type it in the chat, and then we will read that and point it to the right person. And while people are doing that, Michael, I will direct this to you. One of the things that we as a chapter always like to ask is there anything we can do to help? What can we do? How can we support this situation? Is there anything that we can do? And, educate us on how we can be better stewards standing alongside of you all. And while you speak to that, again, I invite everybody on the call to please share a question in the chat. Michael?
Well, I'm not going to be shy about promoting our documentary because there is a critically important message contained therein, not because of me, but because of those who opened their hearts and shared their stories with me. Whatever small gift our movie may represent for people, for the viewer, I have been gifted in ways that I can't begin to describe because of those who were willing to share their stories with us. And I think of myself as nothing more than an aggregator. I aggregated these stories, I cut them together, these voices that, in my strongest opinion, have for too long been ignored, need to be elevated. So come see the movie, and please bring your friends and bring your family. I promise you, you will not be disappointed, because in some ways what distinguishes this documentary, because of what was shared with me, and just another movie about eco-destruction, is how it draws a direct connection between colonial violence and unfettered extractive industrial exploitation, because they are inextricably linked. And that's something we're going to have to embrace before we go forward with the kind of reconciliation that we often hear talked about. There are amazing lessons in the documentary, you know, about ceremony and natural law and indigenous stewardship that need to be learned. And then on a purely simple, practical level, stop using tissue products that are made from tree fiber. It's really easy to do. You can buy tissue products that are made from from 100% post-consumer recycled paper or from bamboo. One of the companies that actually is helping support our screenings here in Los Angeles is called Plant Paper. They're giving away a free roll of tree-free toilet paper to everyone who attends. So you'll get to try it yourself and see that you're really not missing anything. In fact, the product is really of a good quality. And so those are the two things that I could tell you. Nancy and everyone in the movie says it so beautifully. We literally depend on our very survival depends on these trees and plants and forests. And, you know, I often hear from people that Mother Nature is punishing us because we have mistreated her. I don't buy that idea. What Mother Earth is telling us is that we are destroying her ability to take care of us. That's what we're doing. And so we have to stop doing that. And I've come to believe that the larger systemic issue that we're going to have to confront and reconcile is the one of disconnection. Disconnection from each other, disconnection from the rest of creation, disconnection from our children's future. So as Elder A.J. Felix says, let's be family again. Let's recognize that we're all in this enterprise called life together, and that we are all family. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. So yes, we all definitely want it. And I'll bring that QR code up again to make sure everyone has the link. Maybe Michelle, you could drop that link to the Limley and to make sure everybody has that. It's interesting. I'm not familiar with the company you mentioned, but on our leadership call last week, we spent about 5 minutes talking about the company called Who Gives a Crap, which does bamboo toilet paper. And we were all so happy. We felt so glad to be using it. It made us feel good. And so if you guys, just picking up on what Michael said, if you, he's got some in his hand there, Exhibit A. If you haven't tried an alternative toilet paper, there it is. There you go. Yeah. If you haven't tried it, try it, because it's a great product and it makes you feel good because you're doing the right thing. So definitely jump into that. And Michelle just put the Limley link in the chat, so jump in and get that. I can't wait. I think it's going to be so nice to see the film and know and recognize those of you who are on the call tonight as part of it.
There's a really good question in the chat about what age group this is appropriate for, and it depends on the maturity level of the children. But I would say if they're mature, then 10 years old and up. If they're sort of average, I would probably recommend 12. There's no swearing or any of that in it, but there is deeply, deeply disturbing material about what the Canadian state did to the original peoples of what we now call Canada. And so it depends on the maturity level. But, you know, the truth that is spoken in our documentary is the truth. It's not their truth, it's the truth. And it's a truth that we need to embrace. Canadians, Americans, we need to, if we're going to go forward, we need to first be able, and you know, the history I was taught growing up in school is not the history, is not the real history of what happened in Canada. And that needs to be known. it needs to be known. So I would say 10 to 12 years old is probably the age.
Good. Let's see. Brigitte, hi.
Hi.
You know Michael, of course.
I do. And I wanted to ask, what opportunities will there be in the future to see the movie beyond the showings that you've listed?
Well, the goal is we have this 5-hour series that I cut. Again, I had 125 hours of landscape interview and wildlife footage when I came home. And so even condensing it into a 5-hour frame was hard enough. But what's great about the 5-hour series is we get to really cover the deeper, more comprehensive story that was shared with me. And so the feature was never designed to do anything more than have a limited theatrical release wherever we could place it. So we've had it in Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, and now in Los Angeles to try and grow a little bit of a profile around it. And we've been able to do that. The award season is coming up in the next few months, so who knows, maybe we'll find our way into being nominated for one of those awards, which will again increase its profile so we can then find a good home for the 5 hours. And I'm hoping that that will be available probably hopefully by the end of this year or early next. But Birgitta, you know, there are people coming all the way from San Diego, so Santa Barbara isn't that far.
Well, actually, I mentioned it to my husband, and he says, I'm down. So
all right.
We will probably make it.
All right.
But I was thinking how nice it would be, for instance, to show it here in Santa Barbara, or, you know, or is it going to be available eventually on PBS or something?
Well, we don't know where the 5-hour series will end up. We're just in the early stages of having conversations now, but I travel with the film. So we played in Nanaimo and in Victoria and at different film festivals. Nancy joined me in Nanaimo at one of the universities there. We've played at various institutions. Many Indigenous communities across the Boreal invited me to share it with them. And that you can imagine has been profound experience for me. So if you find a theater or a venue where we can screen it, let me know and we'll make our way there.
Well, Kate Varley, who you also know from the LA chapter, is on the call. And Kate, why don't you go ahead and voice your question?
Hey, Diana. Hey, Michael. It's been a long time, so it's great to see you. And it's great to be on this beautiful call together with everybody. Thank you so much for this great information. And I'm really excited about seeing this film. I've talked a little bit to you, Michael, about it. And I was just wondering if you'd been able to, my basic question is kind of a three-parter. First of all, are any companies that position themselves as sustainable, have they made the switch to tree-free products, and what name companies are out there leading the way when it comes to using these products and trying to save these precious forests? Have you had any sponsorships as a result? Any partnerships, anyone coming on board to help get the film out there?
Great question. So number one supporter of our project has been the Audubon Society. Again, hearkening back to the fact that 2 billion birds nest in the Boreal. They have a whole Boreal campaign. The Audubon has a bit of a checkered past that some of us may or may not know about, but the people who who hold the Boreal file at the Audubon are amazing, and they've been huge supporters of the project. On the sort of corporate, you know, are people picking up these tree-free products? I don't know. I know that Who Gives a Crap is becoming progressively more successful. They not only have toilet paper, but tissue paper and paper towels, all of it tree-free, all from 100% post-consumer recycled paper. And then there are companies who are also doing bamboo. So this one company, Plant Paper, that is helping, sponsor our screenings here in Los Angeles, handing out a free roll of tree-free toilet paper. They source their bamboo. It's organic, it's bleach-free, it's dye-free, plastic-free. So they're trying to do it in the right way. How many companies are picking up their products? I don't know what kind of sort of commercial opportunity Who Gives a Crap and Plant Paper and other companies like them are experiencing. I've not asked, but my understanding is I can tell you that everybody I know doesn't use tree fiber toilet paper anymore. So, and there are those of us who have gone wet and wild with the bidet. So there you go.
Well, that's great. This was such a good evening, and I see Chief Darrell Bob still on the call. Just like, thank you so much. To hear you talk, it was just really, look at all, was
Thank you.
really touching, and you bring something to it that only you can. So thank you so much again for being on the call.
It was an honor to meet you all. Thank you.
Likewise.
Stay strong. Don't let them have their way.
We're going to just have you back to be our coach because you're so nurturing and supportive and wise in this. So thank you again so much.
And hopefully next time he'll bring his drum and do some singing.
Well, we got some musicians on this group. I'm a musician. I'd be more than happy to throw in a little harmony or pick up a drum and play with you. That would be amazing. So good. Thanks again.
I actually had the honor of spending 2 weeks at Ojai.
Oh, wow.
Did a teaching there for the foundation up there, the Ojai Foundation.
Oh, nice.
It was really good. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's amazing. It's an amazing place to do some teachings.
Do you do that frequently? Maybe you could let us know if that's an opportunity for us to participate in next time you're here. And
yeah, it's only sporadically on, basic. Right now I'm in Germany doing a ceremony up here over here with some people. So
nice.
Like Michael knows, as being a chief, I get really busy, but at the same time, my number one goal is to, make sure Mother is looked after and to the best of our ability. Mm-hmm. So, and by teaching and educating people, and that's so critical. Right now, we're at like I say, a lot of our spiritual leaders say we're at a crossroads, and that teaching is so important. And, one faith, one prayer, all nations. And that's right now, the way I see it, there's no definition of color or race anymore. The only race we have is the race against time. It's really something to think about, It's a different race than what's mainstream society looks at as race. We're in a race against time, and people know that, but they're scared. So they're trying to make as much money as they can before it all the collapses and things change. And it's people like yourselves on this teachings that are so going to play a major role. We just need to make the sandy beach bigger. More grains of sand gives us more strength. So
that's
I'm just going to leave it at that. But thank you for Michael. Thank you for an amazing opportunity to work with you. And and the other thing I did down there in Santa Barbara was we did a film festival down there, and with the late Dave Corshane, and that one was called Bridgewalkers, done by Cara Rhodes from Santa Barbara. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was quite the thing. Nice. But thank you.
Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for sharing.
If I may just throw something in, so. Chief is a colonial construct. What Elder Darrell Bob is an elder, And that's why when we listen, we're listening to knowledge. And so thank you, Elder Darrell. Really grateful for you to do this tonight, this morning for you. And we'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you, Michael. That, you know, I was feeling something and you really put into words what I was feeling. I was feeling that sense of the knowledge from elders, an old knowledge passed down. So very nice. Well, thank you guys so much. We need to wrap it up tonight. So thank you. And again, we will have this up on our YouTube channel so you can share this and come back and listen to it some more. Thank you all so much. Everybody,
Thank you.
Feel and appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.